The desperate signal. The Karathi collective had existed peacefully for over 2,000 cycles. Across 47 star systems, aquatic species lived in harmony beneath the waves of their gentle ocean worlds. Their cities gleamed like pearls in the deep waters, connected by currents of trade and knowledge. The Karathi themselves were delicate beings, their translucent bodies rippling with bioluminescent patterns that served as their primary language. They had built their civilization on principles of cooperation, scientific advancement, and above all, the avoidance of conflict. Supreme Coordinator Rilneth floated in the central chamber of the Grand Assembly, her light patterns flickering with distress. Around her, representatives from all member species gathered in their specialized water-filled containment spheres. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, allowing dozens of different aquatic species to meet despite their varying pressure and salinity requirements. But today, that technological achievement meant nothing compared to the horror displayed on the central projection. The holographic image showed a world that had once been called Thesara 4, a thriving colony of the collective with nearly 3 billion inhabitants. Now it appeared as a gray, lifeless husk. The oceans had been drained completely. The crust had been stripped away in vast sections. What remained looked like a picked-over carcass. This is the 7th world in 3 lunar cycles. Rilneth's patterns pulsed with barely controlled panic. The Varkesh swarm shows no sign of stopping. They consume everything organic and move on like a plague of locusts. Defense Coordinator Malthus, a heavily armored crustacean species, clicked his mandibles in frustration. His exoskeleton bore scars from the only battle the collective had ever fought, and lost badly. Our defense fleet engaged them at Thesara 4. We had 200 vessels, state-of-the-art shields, and precision energy weapons. The Varkesh destroyed 70% of our forces in the first wave. Their bioships simply absorbed our attacks and kept coming. What are they? Asked Minister Helvis, her tentacles coiling nervously. Where do they come from? Science Director Quentis adjusted his optical stalks, his patterns dimming with exhaustion. The Varkesh are a parasitic hive intelligence. They reproduce by consuming organic matter from other worlds and converting it into more of themselves. Their ships are grown, not built. They have no culture, no negotiation, no mercy. They exist only to feed and expand. The chamber filled with anxious light patterns from dozens of species. The Karathi had never encountered anything like this. Their first contact protocols assumed peaceful intent. Their military doctrine focused on defense and deterrence, not actual combat. They had weapons, yes, but they were designed to disable, not destroy. The very concept of a species that existed only to consume others was beyond their comprehension. How long before they reach Karathi Prime? Rilneth asked, though she dreaded the answer. At their current rate of expansion, 15 cycles, Malthus replied. Maybe less if they accelerate. We estimate their swarm numbers in the tens of thousands of bioships now. Each world they consume makes them stronger. 15 cycles, barely enough time to evacuate even a fraction of their population. The collective had over 30 billion citizens across their worlds. Where would they go? How could they possibly transport so many beings to safety? Quentis suddenly brightened with an urgent pattern. Supreme Coordinator, I have been studying our long-range deep space probes. For generations, we have avoided certain sectors of the galaxy, regions marked as forbidden zones because the conditions there are incompatible with our life forms. Yes, the death sectors, Rilneth acknowledged. Worlds with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme radiation. What about them? Our automated probes have detected something impossible. Organized electromagnetic signals from multiple systems within those forbidden zones. Complex mathematical patterns that suggest advanced intelligence. Not just on one world, but dozens of them. The chamber erupted in confused patterns. How can anything intelligent exist in those conditions? Helvis demanded. Our scientists determined centuries ago that such environments are incompatible with complex life. We determined they were incompatible with our kind of life, Quentis corrected. But what if intelligence evolved under those extreme conditions? What if something learned to thrive in environments that would kill us instantly? Malthus understood immediately. You want to contact them. Ask for help from beings we know nothing about. We know they exist in conditions we consider lethal, Quentis argued. If they can survive worlds that would crush or burn us, perhaps they can fight enemies we cannot. The debate raged for hours. Many representatives argued it was too dangerous. Others said it was foolish to expect help from unknown aliens who might be hostile themselves. But as the arguments continued, Rilnith made her decision. They had tried conventional defenses and failed. They had attempted diplomatic contact with the Varkesh and received only silence followed by attack. What choice remained? "We will send an expedition," Rilnith announced, her patterns blazing with authority. "A single ship with our best diplomatic team and our strongest shields. We will travel to the nearest forbidden sector and attempt contact." She selected the crew personally. Ambassador Kelris, who had successfully negotiated peace treaties across a dozen systems. Science Director Quintus, who understood the technical challenges they would face. And Defense Coordinator Malthus, in case their reception was hostile. Their ship, the Luminous Current, was the finest vessel in the fleet, with shields designed to withstand extreme pressures and temperatures. The journey to Sector 7X took 8 cycles of travel through hyperspace corridors. As they approached the Forbidden Zone, their sensors began registering readings that should have been impossible. The target system contained a yellow star with 8 planets. The third planet from the star showed signs of massive civilization, but the environmental data made no sense. "The gravity reading is twice our norm," Quintus reported, his patterns flickering with confusion. "The atmosphere contains free oxygen at levels that would be toxic to us. The surface temperature varies wildly, from frozen poles to searing equatorial regions. There are massive storms, tectonic activity, and radiation from the star that would sterilize most life we know. Yet you detect civilization?" Rilnith asked. "Massive civilization? Billions of individual life signs. Cities that sprawl across entire continents. Orbital structures, satellite networks, energy signatures that rival our most advanced worlds. Whatever lives here does not just survive these conditions, they have built an empire within them." As the luminous current entered the system, they were immediately detected. A voice came through their communication system speaking perfect Karathi standard language. "Unknown vessel, this is Terran Coalition Defense Command. Please identify yourself and state your purpose." The Karathi crew exchanged startled patterns. These beings had learned their language. They had been listening to collective communications. "For how long?" Rilnith composed herself and responded. "This is Supreme Coordinator Rilnith of the Karathi Collective. We come seeking aid. Our worlds are being destroyed by an enemy we cannot defeat. We detected your civilization in this sector and hope to request assistance." There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "Stand by for contact. We are sending a diplomatic vessel to meet you at safe distance from our homeworld. Welcome to the Sol System, Coordinator. We are humanity." 3 cycles later, Rilnith found herself in a meeting chamber aboard a human space station. The environment was carefully controlled to allow both species to coexist. The Karathi delegation remained in their water-filled containment sphere, while the human representative stood outside in what they called air. Captain Elena Vasquez was unlike anything Rilnith had ever encountered. The human was a bipedal creature that walked upright on 2 legs. Her body was covered in a protective suit, but through the transparent faceplate, Rilnith could see forward-facing eyes like a predator, a mouth full of white teeth designed for tearing, and skin that seemed impossibly thick and durable. Everything about this being screamed danger, yet Captain Vasquez smiled warmly. "Coordinator Rilnith, thank you for making this journey. I know our worlds must seem terrifying to your people. Please tell us about your situation." Rilnith explained everything: the Varkesh swarm, the consumed worlds, their failed defenses, the approaching doom of the collective. As she spoke, she watched the human's facial expressions change. The smile faded, replaced by something harder. The human's eyes narrowed. Her jaw clenched. "These Varkesh," Vasquez said quietly. "They give no warning, no demands. They simply arrive and strip worlds of all life? Yes, they are a plague that cannot be reasoned with." Vasquez nodded slowly. "We know the type. In our own history, we faced threats that could not be negotiated with. Natural disasters, diseases, predators that saw us as food. Our world taught us hard lessons about survival." "Then you understand why we came here," Rilnith pulsed hopefully. "We need allies who know how to fight threats we cannot comprehend." The human stood and walked to a viewport showing the planet below. Even from orbit, Rilnith could see the massive storm swirling across the surface, the volcanic activity along tectonic plates, the vast oceans that raged with waves large enough to swallow cities. "Coordinator, humanity evolved on a world that has tried to kill us since we first crawled out of the water. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice ages, pandemics. We survived because we learned to adapt to anything. We learned to fight when fighting was necessary. She turned back to Rilnith. You came to the right place. But you should know something. Humanity is not alone in the Deathworld Coalition. We have found others like us. Species that evolved under extreme conditions. Together, we have been watching the peaceful civilizations of the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to introduce ourselves. Why wait? Quentis asked. Because civilizations like yours feared us? You called our worlds death sectors and avoided us. We decided to let you maintain your peace until the day you truly needed what only we could provide. Vasquez's expression hardened into something fierce. That day has arrived. The Karathi Collective will not fall to the Varkesh swarm. We will mobilize the coalition and meet this threat. But first we need to understand everything about your enemy. For the first time since the crisis began, Rilnith felt something other than despair. These humans and their allies had lived their entire existence fighting for survival. They were born in hell and learned to call it home. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were exactly what the galaxy needed. Understanding the enemy. The human vessel designated Thunderhead was unlike any ship Rilnith had ever seen. Where Karathi ships were sleek and elegant, designed for efficiency and beauty, the Thunderhead looked like a flying fortress. Thick armor plating covered every surface. Massive engines glowed with barely contained power. Weapon arrays bristled from every angle like the spines of some deep-sea predator. Even its name suggested violence and storm. Ambassador Rilnith floated in her specialized chamber within the ship, watching through viewports as they traveled toward Varkesh-occupied territory. Captain Vasquez had insisted on seeing the enemy firsthand before committing forces. We do not fight blind, the human had explained. We need intelligence. We need to understand their tactics, their biology, their weaknesses. The crew of the Thunderhead moved with practiced efficiency. Rilnith observed them carefully, trying to understand these strange beings. Humans were contradictions. They seemed soft compared to armored species, yet they had evolved on a world with gravity strong enough to crush Karathi bodies. They appeared fragile with their thin skin, yet they thrived in environments filled with toxins and radiation. They looked like individuals, yet they worked together with the coordination of a hive mind. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, the ship's science officer, approached Rilnith's chamber with a data tablet. Coordinator, we are approaching the debris field of Thesara 4. Are you prepared to see what remains? Rilnith's patterns flickered with grief. I must witness it. These were my people. The viewport showed what had once been a thriving ocean world. Now it was a stripped husk. The Varkesh had drained the oceans, consumed the biomass, and even mined deep into the crust for minerals. What remained looked like a diseased organ slowly dying. But around the dead world something moved. Varkesh bioships hung in orbit like grotesque insects. Each vessel was grown rather than built, composed of organic tissue and chitin-like armor. They ranged in size from small fighters to massive cathedral ships that pulsed with alien life. The ships moved in coordinated swarms, their formation suggesting a hive intelligence directing their actions. Fascinating, Webb muttered, his eyes scanning the data flowing across his screens. They are not individual ships at all. They are extensions of a single organism, like cells in a body. Captain Vasquez studied the formation with the calm focus of a predator analyzing prey. How do they communicate? Bioelectric signals, Webb replied. Similar to neurons in a brain. Each ship is connected to the others through electromagnetic pulses. The larger ships appear to be nodes in the network, coordinating the smaller vessels. Then cutting off those nodes would disrupt their coordination, Vasquez concluded. Rilnith watched in amazement as the humans dissected her enemy with clinical precision. Where the Karathi had seen unstoppable horror, these Deathworlders saw puzzles to solve. They analyzed the Varkesh bioships, measuring their armor thickness, their weapon ranges, their formation patterns. They studied the consumed world below, noting how the Varkesh had stripped resources in specific patterns. They are efficient, Vasquez observed. Too efficient. They follow optimization algorithms like machines, not living beings making decisions. That might be their weakness, Webb suggested. If they optimize for efficiency, they will struggle with unpredictability. Chaos disrupts algorithms. A voice crackled over the communication system, speaking in a language that sounded like grinding stones. The ship's computer translated it into Karathi standard. Captain Vasquez, this is Commander Thrax of the Kravik War Fleet. We have entered the system. Where do you need us? Vasquez smiled. Right on time. Take position at grid reference 7 Alpha. Passive sensors only. We are observing the enemy. Rilneth's patterns brightened with curiosity. The Kravik? Another Deathworld species? The first ones we made contact with, Vasquez explained. Their homeworld orbits close to a red giant star. The surface temperature would melt most metals we know. They evolved in volcanic conditions that make Earth look comfortable. They are excellent at operations in extreme heat environments. Another voice joined the communication channel, this one speaking in resonant tones that suggested immense size and weight. Captain, the Thessian battle group has arrived. We await your orders. Maintain defensive perimeter, Vasquez instructed. The Thessians, she explained to Rilneth, evolved on a supergravity world. Their home has 3 times Earth's gravity. They are incredibly strong and durable. Their ships are built to withstand forces that would tear our vessels apart. Rilneth realized with growing wonder that she was witnessing the assembly of something unprecedented. The Deathworld Coalition was not just humanity. It was an alliance of species that had each conquered impossible conditions. Together, they represented adaptations to every extreme environment the universe could create. Over the next several cycles, the Coalition fleet gathered in hidden positions throughout the sector. Rilneth attended planning sessions that completely changed her understanding of warfare. The Karathi approach to conflict had been defensive, focused on shields and evasion. The Coalition approach was something entirely different. The Varkesh operate on hive logic, Commander Thrax explained during one briefing. His form was massive and rock-like, covered in heat-resistant plates that glowed faintly with internal warmth. They optimize for resource acquisition. They swarm targets with numerical superiority. They adapt their tactics slowly through evolutionary pressure, not strategic thinking. Captain Vasquez nodded, which means we can predict their responses to specific stimuli. If we threaten a major bioship node, they will divert resources to protect it. If we attack their resource-gathering operations, they will prioritize defense over expansion. General Corvin of the Thessian forces, a being so dense and heavy that he had to remain on his ship to avoid crushing the station's floors, added his perspective. We fight them in environments they cannot optimize for. Heat, cold, crushing gravity, electromagnetic chaos. We force them into conditions where their efficiency breaks down. Rilneth struggled to understand. But the Varkesh are adapted for space combat. How do we create environments they cannot handle? We bring our environments to them, Vasquez said with a fierce grin. Kravik thermal weapons create localized stellar conditions. Thessian gravity generators create crushing fields. Human ships carry weapons tested in everything from Arctic waste to volcanic depths. We make them fight on our terms, not theirs. The planning continued for days. The Coalition analyzed every aspect of Varkesh behavior, looking for patterns and weaknesses. They studied how the bioships reproduced, how they distributed resources, how they communicated across vast distances. Slowly, a strategy emerged. We will not fight them ship to ship, Vasquez explained during the final briefing. That plays to their strengths in numbers and regeneration. Instead, we target their communication nodes. We disrupt their hive coordination. We force them to operate as individuals rather than a unified swarm. And then, Rilneth asked, then we board their largest vessels and eliminate their queen nodes. Cut off the head and the body dies. The very concept terrified Rilneth. Boarding Varkesh bioships meant entering living alien organisms filled with hostile conditions. The interior atmosphere would be toxic. The passages would be organic and changing. The defenders would be part of the ship itself. But the humans and their allies discussed it with the calm of beings who had faced worse. Commander Thrax had operated inside active volcanoes on his homeworld. General Corvin had trained in gravitational fields that would flatten unprotected beings into paste. Captain Vasquez herself had survived deep-sea missions in Earth's crushing ocean depths and Arctic operations in temperatures that would freeze flesh solid in seconds. To them, hostile environments were not obstacles. They were home. A priority message arrived from Karathi space. The Varkesh had issued their final ultimatum. The swarm would arrive at Karathi Prime in 5 cycles. Surrender all worlds for consumption or face total annihilation. The message contained images of previous civilizations that had resisted, their worlds reduced to barren rocks. Rilneth's patterns dimmed with despair. 5 cycles. We have no time left. Captain Vasquez placed a hand on the transparent chamber containing the Karathi ambassador. Through the barrier, Rilneth could feel the human's conviction like heat from a star. Coordinator, get your people to shelters. Evacuate those who can be evacuated. And trust that those of us who know how to fight will do exactly that. She turned to address her assembled officers from 3 Deathworld species. All coalition forces are to converge on Karathi Prime. We will not let the Varkesh take another world. It is time to show the galaxy what happens when peaceful people are threatened, while Deathworlders stand guard. The officers responded with enthusiasm that transcended their different biologies. Thrax's rumbling battle cry, Corvin's deep resonance of commitment, the human crew's disciplined readiness. They were species that should never have been compatible, united by their shared understanding of survival and their willingness to stand between predators and prey. As the coalition fleet jumped to hyperspace, racing toward Karathi Prime, Rilneth finally understood what made Deathworlders different. It was not just their strength or adaptability. It was their choice. They could have remained isolated in their extreme worlds, avoiding the struggles of others. Instead, they chose to use their hard-won survival skills to protect those who had never needed to develop them. The gentle species of the galaxy had built their civilization on the assumption that intelligence meant peace. The Deathworlders had learned a different truth. Sometimes peace required guardians willing to face the darkness so others could remain in the light. The Stormbreak's Karathi Prime hung in space like a luminous pearl, its vast oceans glowing with the bioluminescence of trillions of inhabitants. The most populated world in the collective, home to 15 billion souls, now stood in the path of an approaching nightmare. Across the planet's surface, cities descended into deep water shelters. Evacuation ships carried those who could flee to distant colonies. But billions remained, trusting that the strangers from the forbidden sectors would somehow accomplish what the collective's own forces could not. Admiral Rilneth, recently promoted to military command, floated in the command center of the orbital defense platform. Around her, Karathi military personnel worked at their stations with determined patterns, even though everyone knew their weapons had proven useless against the Varkesh before. This time, however, they were not alone. The coalition fleet had arrived 3 cycles ago. Now vessels from 3 Deathworld species orbited Karathi Prime in defensive formations. That seemed chaotic to Karathi tactical doctrine, but which Captain Vasquez assured them were specifically designed to counter hive mind tactics. Human ships formed the outer defense perimeter, their heavy armor ready to absorb the initial Varkesh assault. Kravik vessels positioned themselves near the star, using its radiation to charge their thermal weapons. Thessian battleships anchored the formation with their massive gravitational field generators, ready to create zones of crushing force. Varkesh bioship's entering system, reported Sensor Coordinator Pelnis, his patterns flickering with controlled fear. Reading shows thousands of vessels, far more than attacked our other worlds. Rilneth's patterns dimmed. The Varkesh had committed their full swarm to this attack. They intended to make the collective's homeworld an example of what happened to those who resisted. Captain Vasquez's voice came through the communication channel, steady and calm. All coalition forces, battle stations, execute defensive pattern Thunderhead. Remember your assignments. Humans, you have the vanguard. Kravik, prepare thermal corridor. Thessians, stand by for gravity well deployment. The Varkesh swarm approached like a living tide. Bioships of every size swarmed forward in patterns that should have been beautiful in their coordination. Each vessel moved in perfect harmony with thousands of others, their bioelectric signals creating a web of communication that made them function as a single organism rather than individual ships. They are gorgeous in their own horrifying way, Lieutenant Webb observed from the Thunderhead, a perfect example of collective intelligence optimized for resource acquisition. Then let's show them that optimization has limits, Vasquez replied. All human vessels weapons free. Target the peripheral swarm ships. Make them commit their forces. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that made Karathi energy beams look gentle. Kinetic accelerators launched projectiles at relativistic speeds. Nuclear-pumped lasers cut through space with deadly precision. Missile swarms detonated in cascading patterns designed to create maximum chaos. The weapons were brutal, unsophisticated by Karathi standards, but devastatingly effective. Varkesh bioships died by the dozens, their organic hulls torn apart by weapons designed to operate in the worst conditions Earth could offer. But for every ship destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. The swarm absorbed losses with the indifference of a hive that viewed individual vessels as expendable cells in a greater organism. They are adapting their formation, Pelnis reported, concentrating forces on the human perimeter. As expected, Vasquez confirmed. Kravik forces, you are cleared for thermal strike. Light them up. From their positions near the star, the Kravik war fleet unleashed weapons that channeled stellar fury. Concentrated beams of heat so intense that they created localized conditions matching the surface of a red giant. The exotic matter in Varkesh bioships began to break down. Organic armor melted. Internal systems cooked. Entire sections of the swarm suddenly found themselves fighting in temperatures that exceeded their biological tolerances. The Varkesh formation wavered as ships tried to avoid the thermal corridors while maintaining hive coordination. Their optimization algorithms struggled to balance resource preservation with tactical necessity. For the first time, the swarm showed signs of confusion. Thessian battle group. Deploy gravity wells at marked coordinates, Vasquez ordered. The massive Thessian ships, each one built to withstand crushing forces that would pancake human vessels, activated their gravitational generators. Space itself warped around designated zones, creating fields of intense gravity that caught the Varkesh swarm like insects in syrup. Bioships that entered the gravity wells found their organic structures compressed and torn by forces equivalent to falling into a gas giant's atmosphere. The hive mind controlling them had no evolutionary experience with such conditions. Rilnath watched in amazement as the coalition forces executed tactics that seemed impossible by conventional warfare standards. The humans created chaos that disrupted hive coordination. The Kravik controlled environmental conditions. The Thessians manipulated fundamental forces. Together they fought not by matching the Varkesh strength for strength, but by forcing the swarm to operate in conditions where their optimization broke down. But the Varkesh still had numbers. Thousands of bioships pressed through the defenses, accepting losses that would have forced any individual-minded species to retreat. Their target was clear, Karathi Prime itself. If they could reach the planet and begin consuming its biomass, they would replenish their forces and continue their expansion. Cathedral ships breaching the defense perimeter, reported Tactical Officer Kentris. They are heading for the planet. The cathedral ships were the largest Varkesh vessels, each one the size of a city. These ships served as major hive nodes, coordinating thousands of smaller bioships. They were also the primary resource processors, capable of stripping a planet's biomass in days. 6 of them now pushed toward Karathi Prime, their escorts forming protective swarms around them. Time for Phase 2, Vasquez announced. All boarding teams execute insertion protocols. We are taking those cathedral ships. Rilnath's patterns flashed with alarm. Captain, those ships are kilometers across and filled with hostile organisms. How can you possibly board them? The same way we explore our own worlds, Vasquez replied. By going into the places that try to kill us and refusing to die. Human assault ships launched from the Thunderhead, small and fast compared to the massive cathedral ships they targeted. Behind them, Kravik boarding craft glowed with internal heat. Thessian insertion pods built to survive crushing gravitational forces, accelerated toward their targets with brutal directness. The assault ships carried specialized teams trained for exactly this kind of operation. Captain Vasquez led one team personally, her suit modified to operate in the toxic high-pressure environment inside Varkesh bioships. Around her, Marines carried weapons designed for close combat in hostile atmospheres. The boarding craft punched through the organic hull of the nearest cathedral ship like bullets through flesh. Immediately, the interior environment tried to kill the intruders. Toxic gases flooded the corridors. The temperature spiked. Organic walls pulsed and shifted, trying to crush the invaders. Varkesh defender organisms, part creature and part ship system, attacked with instinctive ferocity. But the human team had trained in volcanic caverns, deep ocean trenches, and Arctic wastes. This hostile environment was challenging, but not beyond their experience. They moved through the organic corridors with practiced efficiency, using thermal charges to seal passages and biological sensors to track the cathedral ship's nervous system toward its core. Throughout the cathedral ship, similar teams executed their missions. Kravik forces pushed through sections where the temperature had been raised to extremes that would liquefy most organisms. Thessian teams operated in areas where the cathedral ship had increased gravitational stress to crush invaders, finding instead that the Thessians barely noticed the difference from their homeworld conditions. Captain Vasquez reached the central chamber of the cathedral ship and found herself facing the Queen Node. It was massive, a pulsing organic structure that served as both brain and heart for this section of the swarm. Through bioelectric connections, it coordinated thousands of bioships across the battle space. Its destruction would cascade through the hive mind, disrupting coordination across the entire Varkesh fleet in this system. Target acquired, Vasquez reported. Deploying Neural Disruptor. The device was based on research into Earth's most dangerous predators, those that used electrical signals to stun prey. Modified to Varkesh biology and amplified to lethal levels, it sent a pulse through the Queen Node's nervous system that overwhelmed its capacity to process information. The massive organism convulsed once, then fell silent. Across the battle space, the effects rippled outward. Bioships coordinated by that Queen Node suddenly lost their connection to the hive mind. They continued to fight, but without the optimization that had made them so dangerous. They became individual ships rather than cells in a greater organism, and the coalition forces tore into them with renewed efficiency. 5 more boarding actions succeeded in rapid succession. Each Queen Node destroyed caused more of the Varkesh swarm to lose coordination. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Bioships began colliding with each other, their formation breaking down. Some fled randomly. Others continued to attack, but without the precision that had characterized their previous assaults. All cathedral ships neutralized, Vasquez reported. Her voice steady despite having just fought through kilometers of hostile alien biology. Varkesh coordination is collapsing. Press the attack. The coalition fleet surged forward. Human kinetic weapons tore through disorganized bioships. Kravic thermal beams cleared entire sections of space. Thessian gravity wells captured fleeing vessels and crushed them. The Karathi defense fleet, which had hung back during the initial assault, now joined the battle with renewed confidence. Their precision energy weapons, ineffective against coordinated shields, found vulnerable targets among the confused Varkesh remnants. Admiral Rilnith watched as the unstoppable swarm that had destroyed 7 worlds fell apart before her eyes. The Varkesh had optimized themselves for efficiency against civilized opponents who fought by predictable rules. They had never encountered species that brought the chaos of death worlds to warfare, that used environmental extremes as weapons, that boarded living enemy ships and killed them from within. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Varkesh swarm had been destroyed. Thousands of bioships drifted as lifeless husks. The survivors fled the system in disarray, their hive mind fractured beyond repair. Karathi Prime remained intact, its cities celebrating a salvation they had thought impossible. In the aftermath, Rilnith met with Captain Vasquez aboard the Thunderhead. The human looked exhausted but satisfied. Her suit showed signs of the hostile environment she had fought through. Traces of Varkesh biomatter still clung to the armor plating. "Captain, I do not know how to thank you." Rilnith's patterns glowed with gratitude. "You saved our entire civilization." Vasquez shook her head. "We did what we were built to do. Humans, Kravic, Thessians, we all evolved in conditions that taught us survival is not about avoiding danger. It is about facing it and refusing to quit. The Varkesh were optimized for efficiency. We are optimized for persistence. What happens now?" Rilnith asked. "The Varkesh swarm is broken, but there may be others like them in the galaxy." "Then the coalition will find them," Vasquez replied. "We have been isolated in our extreme worlds for too long. But now we know that the galaxy needs what we can provide: protection, strength, the willingness to stand between predators and peaceful species who never learned to fight." Over the following lunar cycles, the relationship between the Karathi Collective and the Deathworld Coalition evolved into something unprecedented. The Collective offered their advanced sciences, their cultural achievements, their knowledge of thousands of peaceful species. The Coalition offered security, adaptation technologies, and access to resources in extreme environments that gentle species could never reach. Human engineers worked alongside Karathi scientists to design ships that could operate in any condition. Kravic metallurgists shared techniques for materials that withstood stellar heat. Thessian gravitational specialists taught methods for mining gas giants and neutron star remnants. The Karathi contributed biological sciences, communication technologies, and philosophical frameworks that helped the Deathworld species understand the civilizations they now protected. 1 year after the Battle of Karathi Prime, Ambassador Rilneth stood before the Galactic Assembly, a gathering of 200 peaceful species. She addressed them with patterns of conviction and hope. For generations we avoided the death sectors. We called them forbidden zones and assumed nothing of value existed in such harsh environments. We were wrong. Life found a way to exist there, and in surviving the impossible, those species became exactly what the galaxy needed. She gestured to Captain Vasquez, Commander Thrax, and General Corvin, who stood as representatives of the Coalition. These beings and others like them have offered us a partnership. They will guard the peaceful species of the galaxy against threats we cannot face alone. In return, we will share our knowledge, our culture, and our vision of what civilization can become when survival is no longer the primary concern. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Assembly accepted the Coalition as protectors and partners. New treaties were signed establishing joint colonies in regions previously thought uninhabitable. Research stations were built in extreme environments where Deathworld species could work alongside scientists from gentle worlds, exploring phenomena that neither could study alone. Children across the galaxy, both those from ocean worlds and those from volcanic planets, grew up hearing the story of how desperation led to discovery, how the peaceful species crying out in the dark received an answer from the most unexpected place. The aliens had truly had no idea who would arrive when they sent that first desperate signal into the forbidden sectors. But they discovered that salvation sometimes comes from hell itself. That the strongest guardians are forged in the harshest conditions. That when gentle people needed protection, the universe provided beings who had spent their entire existence learning to survive the unsurvivable. The age of isolation was over. The Deathworlders and the Garden Worlders now built a future together, each providing what the other lacked. The galaxy had learned that diversity meant more than different cultures or philosophies. It meant embracing even those species that evolved in conditions considered incompatible with life itself. Because in the end, life always finds a way. And when that life learns to thrive in hell, it becomes exactly what heaven needs to survive. Comment for next part.